So today's guest is Jay Swanson. He is an American living in Paris, working as a full-time content creator. Now, Jay created over 1,700 videos on YouTube and also amassed a very supportive community over on Patreon, which is an online membership platform. Jay's dream was always to move to Paris, and it happened. It all came true. But that entire process isn't always as romantic as it seems. Some of the themes that might come up in today's podcast is how to be a professional storyteller, failing a lot, vlogging daily for 3 years and completely burning out. Also, the financial and the emotional kind of challenges we all face when we work for ourselves, and also where Jay is today in his content creation journey here in Paris. We also have Jay's dog, Cooper.
Forgive the random snorts and farts that might come out in the audio here.
All good. First of all, thank you for being here on Life on Time podcast. And I wanted to tell you that the reason it's called that is because every time I speak to people on these podcasts, I've always noticed that their life was kind of falling into place during their journey. So I'm like curious to see if that happens during this conversation.
I hope so.
And if you felt that way, but also because I genuinely feel like your story as a content creator is so important considering the economy and the climate that we're living in of content creators.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also because I'm curious to see how you identify as what success is now for you as opposed to when you began. So thank you for being here, Jay.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
So I kind of wanted to start off with a little bit of your origin story. Like, give us a little bit of a background
when the atomic spider bit me.
Yes, exactly. Like, where are you from? Give us a little bit of beginning Jay Swanson from Pullman, Washington.
Yeah, good memory, yeah.
And also, you know, kind of bring us to and lead us to how you got to Paris.
Yeah, I mean, I think the trail or the story of coming to Paris is one that I don't fully understand myself. When I was a kid, I just wanted to learn French and I wanted to go to France. And I think that's about as specific as it really got. I refused to learn Spanish. When given the opportunity, I was mad that they interrupted my art class to try and teach us some Spanish. I was like, this is my art time and I will be saving my language brain for French. And just refused until I was in high school. And then I took French all 4 years of high school and struggled because it's hard, but also enjoyed it. And yeah, I just had images in my head, I think, of like the Eiffel Tower or like a chateau or Osmanian architecture, who knows, like things that were in there that were a draw to me.
Yeah. You just knew it was like this feeling inside.
Yeah, just wanted to be here and then moved here right out of college. I did the language assistantship program where you work 12 hours a week in a school as a language teacher, sort of depends on who you're working with and at what level as to how seriously anyone takes that. It's more of a cultural ambassadorship than anything at the end of the day. And I lived in Nice and it was good for my French, but I wasn't so sure that it was for me. I was like, I don't know, this is okay, but like, this isn't really what I wanted. And so I was like, well, maybe France isn't for me. I don't know. Maybe this is good, but okay. And then on the way out, I spent a week in Paris with my parents. And just as soon as I got here, I was like, well, this is what I wanted.
Yeah.
This is what I was dreaming of this whole time. And I had no idea, which is funny because I'd seen Paris briefly the day that I landed, but I was so overwhelmed and jet lagged that I didn't appreciate it. And so I fell in love with the city and was absolutely, I think this happens to a million people, but I was just enamored and wondering, how do I get back? And so that became the quest, was to get back to Paris. So Paris became the focal point and where I really wanted to be. Yeah,
interesting. There's two things from that, because growing up in the United States, I grew up there too. We always learned Spanish first. Yeah. Spanish is like the language, and I never deterred from that. I was like, oh, I'm going to learn Spanish, but you did. For you, was like, I'm learning French.
I learned enough Spanish from Sesame Street. Teach me French.
Totally. And the second thing is, what was it for you though when you saw Paris? Was it the architecture? Was it the people at cafes? What was it for you that felt like, I need to be back here?
I don't know. I think it was the way it made me feel more than anything. And I can't say specifically what. I think everything plays into that. I think the vibrancy, the architecture, the beauty of it, even the stink of it. Like, there's nothing for me. Paris was magical, but I don't think it was ever unreal. It was always something that was kind of grimy and real. I was drawn to the urban, to people moving, to people doing stuff. And I just kind of felt like I could find my place here. Like I was as a kid and as a young adult, like I struggled to find my place, to find where I belonged, or to find my people. And whether or not it was real, when I was here, I immediately felt at home.
Yeah.
In a way that I don't think I ever did anywhere else. And so for me, that was a draw. A huge draw. Whether or not it was real, we may never know. But I think it was. I mean, this is my home, so it's fine.
This is one of the reasons I love talking to you, is because you always, I feel like you're vulnerable, but in a good way, which we'll get into later.
In a good way, yeah.
Well, because you're a YouTuber as well, as a content creator, which we'll get into. One thing that I love about your videos is the vulnerability, because it just feels like I know you.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I have never had that feeling with Paris. I have never wanted to move here. The first time,
the opposite story.
Yeah, I had the opposite story.
Somebody forced you to move here.
Yeah, exactly. So to hear this all the time, I'm like, oh, that's what people feel.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So before I ask you some of the other questions I have, you actually went to college to study film.
I did, yeah.
But then got a degree in French.
Yeah.
Because that plays into you eventually now becoming a professional storyteller.
Yeah.
Why did you stop? What happened with film school?
I hated film school.
Why? Why did you hate it?
I think honestly, more than anything, I think I was too insecure. I think that it demanded a lot of rawness and honesty and the ability to take critique and to really look at myself. And I don't think I was honestly really ready for that.
Yeah.
I think in real terms, I mean, some of the classes were interesting, but the professors were also, some of them were cool, but then like the department chair just cussed me out the second time I met him, just because he was having a bad day. And the philosophy of the department was like, well, you're gonna suffer worse abuse in the industry, so we'll just lay into you now so you get used to it, which I also didn't appreciate. So that was more my reasoning and excuse, I guess you could say. When I quit, I was like, these guys are jerks, and I really don't like where this is headed. I also was like arrogant because I was like, I don't need help with my writing, which the program was very focused on writing. What I really wanted was technical training and like practical. So I came up with a bunch of reasons to quit, which honestly weren't necessarily all great. But to be honest, I don't know that it's a great idea to go to film school in the first place. It's something you can just go and do on your own.
Yeah.
So all around bad choices, probably on all fronts. I don't think there was a win in there. But then I transitioned I had a French minor because I had to have a minor with the film major, and I just made that my major, and then got a German minor.
Oh, I didn't know that. So okay.
But I don't speak German anymore.
Do you think you would be ready now to go to film school, or would you want to go to film school?
No, I mean, I think there's a lot. I have a lot to learn. There's an endless amount to learn, which I think is one of the beauties of storytelling and the creative arts, is there's always more to learn. But I think you just learn more by doing. Yeah. And I think that film school could be great because it gives you access to a number of different things you can't do by yourself. So it might give you access to resources that you can't get by yourself, whether that's equipment. But I think the other side of it is people. Like, it puts you in teams and forces you to learn how to work with other people. And content creation if it's a job, which it is, but I mean, like, as a thing, is often a really lonely road, and you don't work with anybody else. Yeah. And so if you want to work with other people, or you want to go into more of a traditional film, television, advertising kind of a role, it does make sense to go that way, maybe. Yeah. It's a lot of money, though.
It's a lot of money. And I agree with you, where now I'm from the school of thought is go buy yourself a camera and start filming.
You don't need to buy a camera. You've got one in your pocket.
I know. You know what I just saw also was The Fablesman with Steven Spielberg's kind of.
Yeah, you've seen it. I haven't seen it.
Oh, it's so good. For anybody who loves I love cinema and I love movies. It's just beautiful. And just his progression into movies. Okay. So one of the things that I usually do, as you know, before I film these podcasts is kind of have like a pre-interview to get to know the person. And one of the things that you ended up sharing was that, failure was a big kind of part of your life in the sense that
yeah.
you ended up, I think this is just before you got to Paris, or I don't know if it was during Paris, but you had a book deal that didn't fall through. You also were...
It did fall through. Yeah.
Oh, it did fall through. It did fall through. It didn't work.
It did not work.
Yeah, it did not work.
Yeah,
it fell through.
Yeah.
You were also working, I think, on a startup or...
Yeah, so I had a tech startup with some friends in California that also fell flat on its face, and another Kickstarter for a storytelling, like an experimental storytelling thing I'd been doing and had one successful Kickstarter for before. But I didn't ask for the actual amount of money that it cost.
Yeah.
Because I was just trying to keep it going. And the second time I was like, I have to ask for like an actual amount of money this time. And I couldn't raise it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you mentioned you're like, I just felt like a total failure. Like nothing was working out for me in my life.
I think demonstrably I was a total failure. I don't know that. I mean, it depends on how you define failure. But yeah, I mean, if you're trying to succeed and failing at those things, maybe that is at least the temporary label of failure sticks for a minute at least.
Yeah.
That's fun.
So was that the period? Because you moved to Paris around like 30, like officially moved here where you were like, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna give this my all.
Yeah, I was 31 years old.
At 31 and you ended up sharing that, it wasn't really the financially best or strong, like you were in debt, you just were not in the best place. Take us through that time. Like, how did that feel? Because that's a hard move to come to Paris and not feel like you're...
Oh, I had nothing. I had no... Yeah. The one thing I did have, and I have to give a shout out to my landlady, who will probably never hear this, but wonderful, wonderful woman who we're skipping around in the timeline a little to answer this question, but like I volunteered in West Africa for 4-ish years.
Yeah.
And one of the doctors that I worked with, his mom has an apartment here that has a maid's chamber attached to it. Not physically, but like next door. And she was kind enough to let me use it. She'd never let anyone use it in 25 years. And then when I first got to Paris in 2012, was struggling to find a place. She found out about that and had an about face where she'd never let anyone use it. And then she shocked her whole family by being like, why don't you just let Jay use that? And they were all kind of like, wow.
Why do you think that was? Why you? The chosen one?
I do not know. The cosmos shifted though.
Yeah.
And so that, at that time it was a very temporary arrangement to start, but her mentality shifted into like, no, I like having him there. And she's like, you can just stay as long as you want. And then she literally said, this is your apartment until I die. But I didn't take her up. I didn't really believe that for a long time. And so all that to say that I finally came to believe it as I passed through town more and realized, no, she really means it.
Yeah.
And so when I moved here, that's the only way that I could afford to move here was because I had a free place to land and get established. If I hadn't been for that, I mean, I was deeply in debt, like you said. I'd gone into a lot of debt I basically had gone into a lot of debt pursuing my creative work. Like I'd paid for a lot of art. I'd traveled around the country, like promoting one of the fantasy stories that I was writing, gone to a lot of conventions, and I was working a decently paid job as a consultant. So like my airfare was generally paid for. Hotels were points were paid for. I was able to really make it work, but the way that the accounting worked and the way that my mismanagement, honestly, of my money worked and everything, I just kind of slowly built up a debt load that was easy to think was what I was getting reimbursed for what I did for work.
Yeah.
But in reality, I was only getting reimbursed for a part of that, and interest was adding up, and like everything was like kind of creeping up on me.
And you were on your own. You were saying that you just had you to really didn't count back on.
Thankfully I had friends and family I could stay with like on the weekends, and like, so the job was kind of interesting because you'd work 4 days in a place and then they would quote unquote fly you home. But I didn't have a home, so I would just go, because I'd just come back from Africa. So I would go to a friend's place in Boston for the weekend, or a friend's place in Chicago or in LA. And it was a great way to see the country.
Yeah.
But it was pretty exhausting. And that, as that work dried up, is when I was kind of at my most extended, where I'd put so much of my own time and money, obviously time, but a lot of money into the project I was working on. I'd picked up another one, a tech startup with some friends that I was investing in. I was just really over leveraged. And I mean, I just spent years as a volunteer in West Africa. I had no money, and what debt I carried into that from school and from, whatever I had going into it, because I went into it very, very broke.
Yeah. And to give some context, you ended up in West Africa because your parents
So my parents, like they were looking for a change, and they found this organization called Mercy Ships that operates the world's largest charity hospital ships. And they're like, oh, we were interested in doing this. And the funny thing is, I was like, oh, well, I could travel the world and use my French. And I wanted to get out of Spokane, where I was at the time. It was at the peak of the recession and everything, just really, really bad. And I looked into it, applied, ended up getting assigned the wrong job. Like they gave me a job that wasn't good for me. And, but I left, and then my parents ended up in Texas, and I ended up in South Africa, and then West Africa and Central Africa. And it was an amazing experience, both good, really hard, also really bad in all the ways. And so left that. Probably should have like gone and like slept for a year, but instead jumped straight onto an airplane doing consulting work. So I kind of built up, you can see how like this would trend towards burning out at some point, because I just never stopped. I never gave myself the space to deal with the things that I'd seen and experienced.
Yeah.
There's a lot of trauma and things that I never dealt with. And and then you're living alone on the road. You're in hotels. You're in a new rental car every week. You're in a new clinic talking to people you've never met before, who a lot of them don't like you and don't want you there because of what you represent. Because I was consulting on electronic medical records.
Yeah.
So there's a whole wave of new technology. Doctors are getting called out for their fraud. Like there's a lot of stuff going on.
And you're taking a lot of that energy on
you're the guy. So there's and I was underqualified for that job too, because I was like, I just learned the software on the fly more than anything. And then you had to fake your way through it and just charm people and be like, oh, everything's gonna be fine, don't worry about it. Oh yeah, that's a little bit new. Yeah, let me go look. And you're calling someone, you're like, what, how does this software work?
Right.
So all that to say that like I'd built up like quite the backlog of stressful stuff, a lot of debt. And all of it was, I was ashamed of it for a while there, because like I'd been raised with like, a real man pays his debts kind of stuff. But in reality, everything that I was taking on, it wasn't like I was out gambling, buying anything. Everything that I was trying to do, I'm not saying that it was wise or that I would advise anyone to do it, but I have compassion for myself now, because I very much was just trying to make it.
Yeah.
And I really believed. I've been writing books for years, and I was just trying for something to happen there.
Yeah.
I'd always wanted to own some sort of a technology company. I always thought it was fascinated. I've always been interested in the tech side of stuff. So I was trying to make that happen. I had a great opportunity with people I enjoyed and was really having fun building something with.
Yeah.
So everything was like, it was well-intentioned. It was just unfortunately a bit naive. And also I didn't have, there's no family money. There's no really, I couldn't earn a lot of money with the education I had. Who's going to pay a French major to do anything?
Yeah.
After the recession, all of that. So when I got to the point that I was like, okay, either this tech startup's going to go somewhere, or my book is like this Kickstarter for this series I'm doing is going to go somewhere, or the book deal that I'm hoping is coming from this publisher that I'm talking to that keeps asking me for books. I wrote them 2 books and they turned them both down. So like, just like all of it, I'm thinking, okay, cool. Well, I'm very inspired at that point. It's 2015 and I'm super inspired by Casey Neistat, of course, as everyone is at the time.
Who, for people that don't know, is the original kind of,
he
video creator. He transformed vlogging.
He brought like a cinematic skill set to an art form that was just usually people sitting on their bed talking to their camera.
Yeah.
And so he went out into the world and edited to music and pulled like interesting shots and like put like a cinema lens on a webcam.
Because this was one of the people that you felt very inspired by.
Yeah, super inspired. I stole as much as I could from him. Like I was playing with his style when I was still a consultant. And then,
so to give a little context, this whole time you've been creating videos. Kind of,
this was life,
your whole life. You've been creating videos. So during this time, while you are in West Africa and you're, going back and forth, you've been creating videos, but it doesn't really get serious until I think you end up moving to Paris and you do like 3 years of
just before, but so it's at this time period where it's like when I was a kid, anytime that there was any opportunity to do a school project as a video, I would do it.
Yeah.
I would find a way to make that happen because that's just what I wanted to do. I've always loved making videos of whatever kinds. And so when it came to this point in like 2016, I guess actually it was 2016, I had started experimenting in 2015, but then in 2016, I had moved back in with my parents. I was working working 1 or 2 jobs on the side, just trying to make ends meet, paying all these debt payments that were just growing and growing and growing, while then also working on a tech startup and then finishing a book.
Holding multiple jobs to really make ends meet in a way. I
do not envy my former self, any of this. And
well, lessons learned, huh? Lessons learned, I imagine.
But that's when I picked up the camera for real in a way where I was like, okay, I'm going to commit to, I want video to be part of my life again. And I feel like vlogging to tell the story of one of these things happening is the way to go. So if I pick up the camera and like I start vlogging like the process of starting a tech startup, or maybe a book deal does go through, or maybe something happens, then I was like, well, then I'll have a record of it. It'll be interesting. It'll be fun. And if I can commit to making a video every day, then there's a level of discipline in that is good. And it'll bring, video back into being a real part of my life every day.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about this. When you started daily vlogging for 3 years, you did it every single day.
Yeah.
Okay. You end up having like this burnout, and you talk about it on your YouTube channel. I think I remember the video kind of coming out, and you contemplating, even like you could see your thought process where you're like, I can't do this. But there's this commitment when you've gotten that attached to an online community, people that are engaging with you. It's really hard to step away from that when that is becoming the general kind of way that you are starting to, your careers, that's where your career is going into.
Yeah.
I have a few questions about this, because this is so fascinating to me when someone does daily vlogging, because
don't do it. Anybody listening,
so my question is, I was going to ask you that if you were going to do it, if you ever contemplate doing it again, but before
I do.
See, there you go. Bad advice.
Like a heroin addict.
Yeah. So my question is, there's a discipline that is involved with daily vlogging.
Yep.
A lot of people, I think, tend to see content creators as you just pick up your phone, you take your camera, you kind of go home, maybe you'll edit on Adobe Premiere Pro, but that's all skill. That's a skill set. Editing on Adobe Premiere Pro. The night before, you have to have every single thing organized and charged. So you have to have your day you have to give some context to your day.
Speaking of regimented,
Yeah, exactly. So were you doing that, or was it just, you know what, I'm going to see what happens today? Can you take us through the process of like what that looked like?
Yeah, there's a lot in there. Basically your whole life it becomes the same thing. The reason it was hard to let go of more than anything is because it became my identity.
Yeah.
And the reason is because if you wake up in the morning and you immediately like, what am I doing today? Like, not in the sense of like, what am I doing for work? It's like, what story am I telling? Because I got to at least have a theme or something to talk about from the get-go, or I'll get to the end of the day and I'll just have clips of nothing,
Yeah.
And not to say that I succeeded every day. I go back and watch some of my videos. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe people watched this. I'm so grateful that people put up with me. But you wake up and you're like, okay, well, I know that I have to go to work. I know that I'm doing this job and that job today, which means I'll go over here. So like, well, okay, so you have like certain set pieces where you're like, okay, I know that I'll film my commute a little bit. And I know that I'll film like making coffee, or I'll film this, certain things that kind of help to be there in case nothing else happens.
Yeah.
But then you're like, okay, well, the story I'm going to try to tell today is the story of the time that blah, blah, blah. And you pick like the time that I went bankrupt or whatever. And let's tell that story today. And then the goal is to keep that going through the whole day linearly. So no matter what you're doing throughout the day, you're always having to check in and be like, okay, where did I finish that? Okay, so then I'll pick up here. Where did I stop talking? But you also don't want to, if you're going to do it in the nice style, we'll say, like, you don't want to say everything in one go either. Like unless you're just doing a sit down and talk and you're changing the camera angles and whatever. If you're going out and trying to tell a story over the course of an entire day, then you also have to kind of think in 1 minute clips.
Yeah.
And be like, okay, I've got like a 5-10 minute story that I want to tell, but now I have to break it up over the course of the entire day. So it's always breaking in to your thought process, the camera angles of this, of that, like, oh, that would be cool. This would be great. Trying to find some fun and have fun with it while still doing whatever job you're doing, while still talking with your friends or family.
Can I ask you a very real question? I don't mean to interrupt you, but there's so much in this. How was it when you were filming with other people around you? Was that kind of ever an issue where people were like, I don't want to be in your video? Or, you're trying to really give a comprehensive idea of your day, which is other people, your best friends. And those little moments I've recognized can sometimes, be bothersome to someone else. And so you have to adjust your content accordingly. Did you ever find that was true for you?
Sort of. I think and I've asked my friends this before, and they've been asked this on camera, so I can speak for them that no, generally it was never intrusive. I was generally really good at hiding it, but it would take me out of the moment sometimes.
Yes.
Or a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So one of the things I don't miss, one of the things I miss about it is like, there's a permanent, there's like a record of everything every day of my life for 3 years, and that's really cool. Like, what did I wear? What did I eat? Who did I see? It's all there. Most of it's there. But then, at the same time, like, was I really living it? Was I really fully present because every night when I finished my edit, hit upload and went to bed, it's kind of like, well, my memories are in the cloud now, so my brain didn't really even remember half of it, you know?
Yeah, and you were saying that you would have to leave parties early because when you're doing this every single day, it's like you got to go home, you got to edit because you've got to have this video up for the next day. And then for the next day, everything needs to be charged on your laptop so you can start refilming again. At this time, are you ever questioning? There's two questions I have about this. Because a lot of times I think people wonder if these type of professions are like a noble profession because they're so involved, self-involved in a way, even though you're actually showcasing a really beautiful way of how you're living your life. And secondly, I had asked you, I was like, hey, Jay, did you have like any professional goals with this when you were daily vlogging? And you were like, no, but had I had professional goals, I might have, you know, steered myself in a different direction. Because at this time, I think you were purely doing it for self-discipline, understanding like every single day I'm going to create something. So, I
was just having fun with it. I think for me, it was a connection to the outside world because where I was living in the circumstances I was in, like I felt unseen and invalidated. And I didn't feel a sense of connection, you know, really to anyone, not anyone, but I like really felt like lost. So being able to, on attend, some good, we've got to break down those boxes sometime. Il est en colère avec les boîtes là.
Putting all these boxes in a trash can.
Il fait semblant que c'est Macron et.
Hopefully now you can hear it. Like he's breaking these wooden boxes.
Oh jeez.
I feel like that's good though.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
So, oh no, hold on. So basically, sorry, we had to have a little pause right there. Did it give you that validation, daily vlogging, that you were maybe kind of seeking?
Sort of. I mean, it gave me, not locally, but the point was more that it gave me a connection to an outside world. Like there was an audience there that were a few friends that would watch, and then also people, strangers that I didn't know that would watch and engage with it. And for me, it was like a creative outlet, a connection, and like I said, a form of discipline. And certainly there were hopes in there that somebody would care and that maybe an audience would form.
And how many followers did you have at this time? And I only asked that because I know it wasn't important for you, but just to be able to measure where you are now, because now we'll get into it on this beautiful community that you've created on Patreon and on YouTube. But where were you at, like, what was the audience size?
It's always important. Like as much as I would like to believe that it was never important, like obviously you're always measuring yourself. And, but I had like 400 subscribers.
Oh, okay.
And that was because I almost started from zero because the account that I have now had been blocked by YouTube because I tried accessing it from the Congo and they flagged it as suspicious. And then I couldn't actually connect with them at all to be like, no, it's really me. And then they just blocked it and I could never get it back. And so thankfully I had one of the team members on the startup I was working on actually worked at YouTube.
Yeah. And
so he just mentioned to a friend at work kind of a thing like, hey, my buddy's got an account that's been blocked. And that day it just magically got unblocked. So that was in the midst of, we were on our way to Taiwan actually for the manufacturing part of the startup story, blah, blah, blah. All that to say, I had when that got unblocked, I had about 400 people that had subscribed to me before.
Yeah.
None of whom I don't think really cared anymore. Like one or two of them.
Right.
But then...
And did you have a Patreon at this time? And I think you had a Patreon for writing.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I did have a Patreon.
You had a Patreon for writing,
I had a Patreon for writing, but there were like only a handful of people on that as well. Yeah. So
the 3 years of daily vlogging was really self-development in a way, getting that discipline. And you end up, did you gain any larger community at the end of those 3 years?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think the thing is that I almost quit at the beginning of the first year because I set for myself a season that was like 54 weeks long, which is insane. And that's all because I made these ridiculous intros that I was like, I pre-recorded them all.
They were very animated.
Yeah, super animated. Not a good choice from like a retention standpoint, but like I was just trying to demonstrate. I think I was trying to prove to the world because I knew that I was disciplined. It wasn't that I had to develop the discipline myself. I've been posting a photo every day for 5 or 6 years at that point.
Yeah, on Instagram, right?
On Instagram and but obviously video is next level. It's not the same thing, but I was like, I know that I can do this, but I didn't feel like anyone believed in me. That I don't think anyone else believed that I could do it. I didn't feel like supported or seen. So in a lot of ways, everything that I was doing was a bid to be seen and to have people believe in me.
Yeah.
Ultimately, like the root of it was that I didn't feel, I guess loved is an intense word before it, but it's true. Like I didn't feel like seen and understood.
Yeah.
And
Thanks so much for sharing that, Jay.
Sure.
Because yeah, that is a very beautiful and honest, truth that a lot of times I think content creators, or specifically people that really dedicate themselves to this YouTube, habit, it's a part of it is wanting to get seen for reasons that might be internal, that you're trying to discover yourself. And so, I really appreciate that you're so, open about that. But so why the burnout that happens? Was it like, did you just wake up one day and you were like, I cannot do this anymore? Where were the moments where you were like, oh my God, this needs to stop, or I need to change?
No, I think it's more of becomes a physical ailment and just like slowly over time, develops into, you get angry, you're exhausted, you struggle just to do simple, basic things and, show up and do it, but you get bored with it and like you start to hate it and you don't like what you're doing should be the most fun, best job ever, but it's miserable. And it starts to
people around you feel it. And
I'm sure, but I think it's that thing where it's like you just, I was going through a lot, I guess. And so it just eventually, but I think the harder thing was actually stopping, because it doesn't matter what it comes down to a belief system that if you don't really believe in taking care of yourself and like slowing down, stopping, and like I said, going back to like the fact that I'd done it every day for 3 years, and it's what I did every waking hour, and I was sleeping 5 or 6 hours a night. And
did you ever miss a day?
No, I never missed a day.
Wow.
So I took a break between the first and second year for like a week or two. And that's what I was going to say is like, I almost quit at that point because I was like, well, I didn't even have 1,000 subscribers. I was maybe getting like a subscriber per video.
And how were you kind of living life as far as like financially?
I was teaching English. I had been a tour guide. I was doing translation and voice acting work. I was just doing a whole bunch of different things.
Because when you work for yourself, those little contracts, you're always looking at, because you work for a certain amount of time, you might garner a little bit of money, but then you might have a small break of a month, but then you got to go right back into, what's my next job?
Yeah.
And so, okay.
So it just kind of built up. And then at some point you're like, okay, I have to stop this. But then it still took me like 2 years to really figure out, like, I stopped vlogging daily, but then what do I do? Who am I?
Yeah.
Like I am a daily vlogger.
Yeah.
So now what am I?
Okay.
And then I was already in a place where I was losing my sense of identity in like every other arena of my life, which was a healthy process, but like left me very untethered.
Yeah.
And so I tethered myself to daily vlogging I didn't realize it when I started, but it was really my last ditch effort. It was like my last hope, really. And thankfully it worked out, but also like that was very valuable to kind of save me for a time, but then became an anchor at the other side and like really held me back. So that transition was really hard.
Did you end up taking a break after?
Sort of.
Whoa. Okay.
Not really ever. I mean, like I did finally take a break like a year or two later. Like I would take a little bit of time off, but I would still I'll do a weekly vlog now, or I'll do 3 days a week, or like I played with a lot of different formats.
Were you still vlogging just about you?
Yeah, mostly about me. I mean, like the whole thing had always been like, when I went into it, I was like, well, this is a personal project. And if I build an audience, it'll be around myself.
Yeah.
And if not, then that's fine. But like, I didn't want to identify too strongly with any one niche on YouTube. Yeah. I just was like, no, I'm just going to be me, which is why I liked the whole daily vlogging thing. But what nobody really was telling anyone at that time. Yes. And what is very clear now to anybody that is a content creator or watches the industry is that like vlogging and doing anything personal like that is like a moonshot, because nobody cares about any other individual that they don't know anything about.
Yeah, you got to be invested in that person to say, I'm going to follow you around this whole day and know what you're doing.
They've got to be doing something really new and interesting, or they have to be super dynamic and really like someone that you connect with. Like you have to be on either end of the spectrum, where you're either like an Emma Chamberlain who's just like can master the camera by being in front of it.
Yeah.
And is so engaging that her audience just loves her no matter what. Or like a Casey Neistat who already had a following.
Also timing. Don't you think timing kind of plays a part in this?
Yeah.
Because you're also one of kind of the first American YouTubers to really showcase Paris in the way that you do now. Because
maybe.
Now I feel like you've really transitioned. We can talk about this. It seems like you've gone from vlogging and really talking about yourself personally to now showcasing, you know, maybe the top places in Paris to do X, Y, and Z. When we talked, you mentioned that you were hesitant to become that Paris guy that was giving tips like the top 5 croissants in Paris. Yeah. Why were you so hesitant in doing that, knowing that that is what really drives a lot of traffic and curiosity? Because when people are traveling, they want guides, they want an expert. What was the hesitancy there?
I think it goes back to insecurities and like not wanting to be pigeonholed. And I mean, I still wanted to write fiction and I still wanted to, you know, just be myself. But I think I had an immature look or an immature view of how things worked and was worried that by doing that, I would be kind of giving up on what I really wanted to do. And now I've come to realize as I've like actually taken some time, Cooper's really bored with me, obviously, as I've taken my time and like really kind of figuring myself out and like accepting my place in the world in a way.
Yeah.
Like I've stopped fighting the obvious. Like I've stopped fighting like where that success can come from, and also realize that like just because you succeed in one thing, that doesn't have to be the only thing you ever succeed at. It's weird how scared you can be of succeeding at something. And I think that for me, it's like I was really scared that if I did that, then I'd get pigeonholed into something that I didn't fully embrace. And now I've been able to come around. The reason that I'm able to embrace it now is because another thing about me that I've had to work on is that like I don't value anything I can do or anything that I do. I'm like, I look at it ironically, feeling unseen and unvalued. I wasn't really valuing myself. And so despite the fact that I would get these really nice emails, people would send me tips for family members. They'd be like, my wife just got back from a trip and loved everything you did and it made her time better. Here's $100. Thank you for making her time better.
Yeah. To give some context, now we're kind of going into the world also of like Patreon, which is...
Well, that was more just through PayPal.
PayPal, but you also have like Ko-fi you were mentioning.
Yeah, Ko-fi is just a PayPal portal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you have started to build this community of people that were really starting to love your content and also engage with you.
And that's the thing is like, that's also what made it really hard to transition away from it is because like everything. So my Patreon, I really converted away from I didn't even convert it away from the writing, I don't think, until I was like way deep into the vlogging. So I didn't want to let that go. And I was like, well, there's no point to keep, because I was still trying to write a book. I was writing another book at the time. And I was like trying to do everything at once.
Yeah.
Which is a huge root of the problem too. So I finally was like, okay, well, my Patreon can become about vlogging and I'm going to commit to actively promoting it. And then that slowly grew in that second year of vlogging to the point that I was like, okay, if we get to this point, I will quit my side jobs and just do this, which in one way is really good because like most of the side jobs I was doing, I didn't enjoy anyways. But then on the other side became confusing as well because I got into it to tell a story about my life, not to just vlog. Like making content for its own sake to me becomes very hollow and pointless pretty quickly. And so like vlogging just a vlog. Yeah. What am I doing? Where's the story? What is this about? Like it used to be a story about me coming to France, trying to survive. Yeah. How do I make enough to live? Like I was paying before I went bankrupt. So it's a whole nother story. But before I went bankrupt, when I first moved here, I came here expecting to get an English teaching job. And then they were like, they were like, yeah, we'll give you a job. It was April. And they're like, we'll give you a job in October. And I was like, cool. What do I do? So like, when I was running out of money, I was a tour guide. All the money I made as a tour guide went straight to paying debt. And the only money I had left over for food was whatever I got tipped. Yeah. And like, so I was in this really stressful place where I was like, just trying to figure it out. So that, I mean, kind of in a sick way makes for great storytelling. So it's a great story is like, will I survive or not? Yeah. You get to the other side of that and suddenly you are able to I wasn't making much money, but I was able to survive off what I was doing with YouTube. Like, and that's all you do now. Like, you just like launch yourself into a void. Yeah. Storytelling wise. And also spiritually, like, you're just like, why am I here? What am I doing?
Yeah. Like, is this a noble
and no, I would say it's not. At that point,
is this something that is worth doing? Those questions start to come up. Yeah. So I'm going to fast forward real quick and ask you, where are you now? How many followers do you have on YouTube?
Like 75,000.
Okay, that's a huge jump because 75,000 followers on YouTube in the current economy of social media, YouTube is king in my eyes. I really feel like that is the top platform where you go as a content creator when you're really serious because it is long form content.
It's hard, yeah.
Even though you do have short form content now with YouTube Shorts. When you get to 75, are you feeling validated? Are you feeling like, oh my gosh, I have 75,000 followers on YouTube? Do you feel like everything that you had worked for, there's a sigh of relief because you've built this community not only on YouTube, but now every time you do a YouTube video, you know, you're mentioning like Patreon. There's a person from Patreon who sponsored the video. And so it feels good to see that, to know that someone that has been working so hard is now having that kind of support.
I think that the answer to that question comes down more to defining what is enough, because like in YouTube terms as well, like 75,000 is not that much.
Yeah.
And the average YouTuber is not going to make a full-time living off of. The reason that I'm fortunate enough to is because I'm really lucky to have the community that I do have.
Yeah.
And because
which is an art, Jay.
They've jumped onto, well, thank you. But like, well, I'm nervous about it now because if there's anything that I'm worried about losing, it's those people because they're so important. And they've stuck with me through some weird transitions, right? Like they've seen me go from being a daily vlogger to a weekly vlogger, maybe a monthly vlogger 3 times a week. What is he doing now? And he's doing little clips here. He's doing this, he's doing that. So I've been lucky to have the support of people that like, as a group generally have been just insanely wonderful. And so the only reason that I've been able to, because I went full time on YouTube with like 20,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
Because of them.
That's when you went full time and you're like, I'm at 20,000. I'm going to do this.
Well, it wasn't because of the subscriber number. The other thing is that subscribers are a vanity metric anyways.
Yes.
Like you can have a ton of subscribers and nobody watches your videos. You can have a ton of people watching your videos and nobody cares.
So what do you measure as a caring community?
Well, I think that at the end of the day, like that's a really good, it's a very good question because it's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. And I think it comes down to, again, what is enough, but also not tying my emotional well-being to a crowd of ultimately strangers.
Yeah, that's so true though. That's not just true on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's true on all platforms like Instagram, TikTok, you go on YouTube Shorts, anywhere.
Yeah.
Discord, any of these other external platforms, you got to really stay a little disattached from the validation that you're receiving in the comments.
You can't get it from that. And you can't. So that's why for me, it's a hard question to answer in those terms because I think I come from, so I don't come from a family with any money. I don't have a lot of support in that arena. And I've always been right on the knife's edge of just losing everything. So for me, emotionally, it's taken time to get to a place where I'm not worried the other foot's about to drop.
Yeah.
And I'm finally there, but it's taken a lot of time. And I think that is because of the consistency of that community and also like, between Patreon now my like the guide sales that we're doing like and the plans to build a business that can be something that can exist outside of my output where it's not dependent on me to show up and make a video every day. I can actually work on some strategy or some other plans or just take a break.
You started your guides. You started your Paris guides, which
I've been doing that
is
for years.
Paris in the Pocket guide, right?
Well, now, so it's gone through a rebranding of like Paris in my pocket,
which I think is so great.
Thanks.
It's such a smart
it's
way.
Fun name. Yeah.
Fun name. And it's what you want. I don't want this big, long, thing I need to download. I want something quick. I want to know where to go.
Well, yeah, we're hoping to make it even quicker. And I think that's the thing is it's like it's been hard. That's where things get kind of scary is because I've built a very personal brand.
Yeah.
And I did start doing a podcast a couple of years ago now, a year and a half ago, maybe to offer like more of a personal connection for people that still wanted that through Patreon, especially. But I've also gotten to a place where like, I've realized that like there's a real danger and potential unhealth in sharing too much or in just not having the breaks ready to go. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's like this year I decided for one, a lesson learned is like, you just have to focus. Like something I've never been able to do very well or wanted to do was focus because there are too many things to do, too much fun to have. And I finally kind of grew up a little bit in that front to be, willing and able to just focus. And Paris and the content that I create there is the most obvious and direct way to go, because the route to like the life that you want, it lies on the end of some success. And I think you can brute force your way into the success you think you should have, which is what I've been spending most of my life doing. But there's also an easier path that you could choose. And as long as that path is both like ethical, moral, and above board, but something that you can and will enjoy, why not take that? And so for me, going back to what I was saying earlier, like I finally came to appreciate, sorry, buddy. Cooper he's kind of sick of just sitting here all
we're almost done, Cooper.
Yeah,
we won't
you're fine,
take up
buddy.
Too much time.
No, he's fine. He's just been sitting a lot today. So I think for me, it's like I finally came to take seriously just how strong of a positive impact just helping people have a good vacation could be.
Yeah.
Like helping people to, maybe it's their once in a lifetime trip to Paris.
Yes.
Making sure that they feel confident, safe, that they aren't going to waste a minute of it.
Yeah.
That they know how to get around. If they're a little bit anxious, they can do some pre-planning.
Well, I think there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah.
But also value because you have been living here now for 4 years, right?
Oh, 6. But
6
I
years.
I first moved here over a decade ago.
Yeah. And you do, you're very much in the coffee scene. One of the things
Sure.
we didn't talk about is when you first moved here, you were also working as like a bike guide or something like this at Peloton, I think, right?
Yeah.
And so you did build this, you have places that you like to go, and that's a lot of value-driven content. And I like that. And I love the videos that you've been doing recently, which is like, these are the places you might want to go for this or that. And I think, that's coming from someone who's lived here and really understands it.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense as far as where you might be taking your, I hate to use the word business, but where you're kind of going with your content, No,
but it is a business. I think the thing is that like content creation on its own can be its own business. And I think that it makes sense. Like what you do with other clients, it's not dependent on the content you necessarily directly create.
Yeah.
And I think that like the allure is if you want to, I want to be a content creator, I want to be a TikToker or YouTuber or whatever. Like you think, I get to make stuff and people like it and then I make some money and great, but you're on a hamster wheel at that point. And as soon as you get off, depending on what platform you're on, it will very slowly or maybe very quickly slow down to nothing, right?
Yeah.
So the goal, I think, if you want to have longevity within this industry in particular, you have to build a business that can exist outside yourself. Yeah. Where maybe even if you're still the face and you're still the brand of it, you build something that can support you and that can maximize everything that's happening around it and eventually maybe work on its own without you, so that you can bring your best self to the table to make the content you make. But then if you need to take a break for 3 weeks or or a year, you're not at risk of losing everything because you put the brakes on.
This is such great insight. And my main intention with this conversation and this podcast.
Oh, now she tells me.
Is to give insight and guidance to anybody who might be feeling inspired. Sometimes you hear a conversation, you're like, I never thought I could do that. But then I see that this guy, Jay, ends up moving from Pullman, Washington to Paris, and he goes through this whole path of life and they feel inspired. Yeah. And that's always been my intention, is to bring clarity, insight, and guidance to this world and to someone's experience. So thank you for doing that. I feel like I could go on and on. I have so many questions. There are much better,
safer, saner ways of doing what I've done. Don't do it the way I did it.
We might have to have you back for a part 2 because I have so many more questions. But we are going to have to wrap this up. I have one last question for you is, if you could offer yourself one piece of advice before starting YouTube, what would that be, Jay?
One piece of advice before starting YouTube?
Yeah. Like now that you have a really great understanding of it.
It's hard because all the advice that I would have for myself would be like, go to therapy.
Which is smart. I mean,
deal with your own stuff. I think the thing, YouTube in a lot of ways acted as a form of therapy for me. It was very helpful and beneficial in so many ways, but everything that held me back from greater success, you have to put in the hours no matter what. So there are very few people who just blow up immediately, and the people that blow up quick usually burn out quick. So
we see it happen all the time. Like all the stories.
Longevity, like you don't court too much success too soon, which is a hard pill to swallow when you're younger, but like really like just let it take its time. But I think part of that is like everything that ever got in my way of greater success faster was always something in me that I needed to face and I needed to deal with. So it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but it's true. It's like, whether that's through therapy or whatever else, like deal with yourself first.
Yeah, that's such smart advice. And you can see that you've really kind of brought that into your
I'm trying.
your rhetoric on YouTube. You know, we met because we have common friends, but I had already known you before on YouTube, and I kind of love that because I really do appreciate. I think I even told you this when I saw you. I was like, oh, I appreciate that you speak about, you know, weight loss and dating. We talked a little bit about that, like dating when you're a little bit known in you meet people. That's a whole nother story, which me and Jay talked about.
I was going to say that's the litmus test when you're a daily vlogger. Like, do I like this girl enough to have one more drink? Because that means I'm not going to get to bed till 4 in the morning when I'm done editing. Yeah, I
know that's interesting. Well, I do want to really thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I really think like your story is so great, and I'm so excited to see where you're gonna go to, and hopefully you'll be back on this podcast.
I hope so.
Yeah, thank you.
I wish you all the success with the podcast.
Yes.
And when I come back, you'll be like, we barely made time for you, but
I know.
Sorry, Jay-Z just left. And,
yeah. Well, thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Yeah.